knock on the church's side door came just as I was about to leave. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had only come to return a box of old photo albums that had somehow stayed in my garage for 6 years after the divorce. I thought I'd drop them off quietly before the wedding guests arrived. No awkward conversations. No painful memories. Just one last unfinished task. Then the door opened. Emily stood in front of me wearing a wedding dress. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow completely different. The same warm brown eyes. The same gentle smile that had once convinced me I could survive anything. But there was sadness behind that smile now. The kind that only appears after years of carrying invisible weight. She glanced at the box in my hands, then looked back into my eyes. I never thought you'd actually come. I wasn't invited, I answered softly. I know. She stepped closer until only a few inches separated us. Then she whispered the last words I ever expected to hear. Before I marry him, would you relive our past with me? Just for 1 hour. The hallway around us disappeared. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. 6 years earlier, Emily and I had signed divorce papers inside a quiet courthouse without raising our voices once. People assumed we had stopped loving each other. That wasn't true. Sometimes love doesn't disappear. Sometimes life simply becomes louder than love. When Emily's mother became seriously ill, she moved back to care for her. At the same time, my father suffered a stroke, leaving me responsible for his rehabilitation and the family business. We spent months living in different cities. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became impossible. Stress turned patience into frustration. Eventually we convinced ourselves that letting each other go was kinder than asking the other to sacrifice even more. The divorce was peaceful. But peaceful doesn't mean painless. Afterward, we never blamed one another. We simply disappeared from each other's lives. I focused on rebuilding the business. Emily became a pediatric nurse. Friends occasionally mentioned her name, but I never asked questions. Some memories hurt less when left untouched. Now she stood before me dressed to marry another man. I know this sounds strange, she said quietly. But please. What exactly do you mean? She smiled through eyes already beginning to fill with tears. I want to visit the places that made us who we were. I hesitated. Does your fiancé know? He does. That surprised me. He told me that if I had unfinished memories, I shouldn't carry them into a marriage. For the first time, I wondered what kind of man she was marrying. He sounded confident enough not to fear the past. I nodded. 1 hour. She laughed softly. 1 hour. Her maid of honor handed her a long coat to cover the wedding dress. Minutes later we climbed into my old pickup truck. Neither of us knew where to begin. Eventually Emily pointed toward downtown. The diner. I smiled. The terrible pancakes. They weren't terrible. They absolutely were. She laughed harder than I had heard in years. They were awful. The waitress recognized neither of us. Time had changed our faces. But the cracked red booths were still there. Emily ordered coffee. I ordered pie. Just like every Saturday morning during our first year of marriage. We talked about ordinary things. Books. Work. Our aging parents. The conversation felt strangely comfortable. As though 6 missing years had quietly folded themselves away. When we left, Emily stopped outside the diner. Thank you. For pancakes. For remembering how to laugh. Next she asked me to drive to the Riverside Park, where we had spent countless evenings after work. The old wooden bench still overlooked the water. Someone had carved fresh initials beside the faded ones we once joked about. Children chased ducks along the shore. An elderly couple shared ice cream. Life had continued without asking permission from anyone. Emily sat silently for several minutes. I used to come here after the divorce, she admitted. I didn't know. I hoped I'd accidentally see you. I looked down. I came here too. She stared at me. When? The first Sunday of every month. We both laughed at the absurdity. For almost 3 years we had unknowingly visited the same park on different weekends. So close, she whispered. So close. A cold breeze drifted across the river. Emily pulled her coat tighter. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. She looked toward the water. I spent years believing you chose work over us. You believed that. I did. I sighed. I thought you chose your mother over us. My mother needed me. I know. My father needed me too. Neither of us had been wrong. Neither of us had been right. We had simply been overwhelmed. Sometimes. Two good people lose each other because they are both trying to save everyone else. The realization hurt even after all those years. Our final stop surprised me. The animal shelter. We had adopted our first dog there during our honeymoon week. Emily smiled at the barking puppies. I volunteer here every Thursday. You always loved helping. She shook her head. No. We loved helping. A frightened golden retriever puppy hid in the corner of a kennel. Emily sat on the floor without hesitation. She didn't reach toward him. She simply waited. Patiently. Quietly. After several minutes, the puppy slowly walked into her lap. Watching her, I remembered why I had fallen in love. Not because she was beautiful. Not because she was funny. But because kindness seemed as natural to her as breathing. One of the shelter workers approached us. He's been terrified since arriving. Emily gently stroked his ears. Sometimes feeling safe takes time. I realized she wasn't talking about the puppy anymore. She was talking about us. When we returned to the church, 45 minutes had passed. Guests were beginning to fill the parking lot. Emily stood beside the truck without moving. There's one more thing. I nodded. She reached into her purse and handed me a folded envelope. I wrote this after our divorce. I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 6 years earlier. If you're reading this, it means life somehow gave us another conversation. I never stopped loving you. But love isn't always enough to build a peaceful life. Thank you for every ordinary day that became extraordinary because we shared it. Please don't spend your future wondering if you failed me. You didn't. You loved me with everything you had. Sometimes everything we have still isn't enough to defeat timing. I folded the letter carefully. My vision blurred. I should have told you all this years ago, she whispered. You just did. She smiled. So, are we okay? I looked at the woman who had once been my entire world. For years I believed closure arrived through forgetting. Instead, it arrived through understanding. We're okay. She stepped forward and hugged me. Not as husband and wife. Not as people wishing to turn back time. But as two human beings finally setting down the weight they had carried alone. When she pulled away, someone called her name from inside the church. It was her fiancé. He walked toward us with calm confidence. Instead of looking threatened, he extended his hand. You must be Daniel. I am. I'm Michael. We shook hands. Thank you, he said. For what? For giving her this hour. I smiled. She gave it to me too. He nodded as though he already understood. She told me your story. I expected jealousy. Instead I found gratitude. He looked at Emily with the kind of respect every person deserves. In that moment, I knew she had chosen well. As they turned toward the church entrance, Emily glanced back one final time. Not with regret. Not with doubt. But with peace. I'll always be grateful for our past, she called. And I'm grateful it happened. Then she walked forward. This time, I didn't watch someone I loved walk away. I watched someone I loved walk toward happiness. There is a difference. Months later, I received a package. Inside was a framed photograph from our visit to the animal shelter. On the back, Emily had written one sentence. The best love teaches us how to love others, even after it ends. That picture still hangs in my living room. People sometimes ask why I keep a photo of my ex-wife. I simply smile. Because they see a woman in a wedding dress. I see something much bigger. I see forgiveness replacing resentment. I see compassion defeating pride. I see two people proving that kindness can survive even where marriage cannot. Life doesn't always reward us with the ending we planned. Sometimes it gives us something better. The chance to leave another person's heart lighter than we found it. And in a world that often celebrates revenge, winning, and being right, I have learned that the greatest victories are usually much quieter. They sound like forgiveness. They look like understanding. And they begin the moment we choose humanity over hurt.